everyone, I'm Colombe and this is Andrea.
Hello everyone!
And we are the hosts of How to Build a Country. Today is season 0, episode 6, and we'll talk about the fact that nations have to adapt or die.
We are talking about this because today our countries are dying. Political participation is declining. Democracies are weaker than ever. And we believe that the problem is that our institutions are stuck in time. We have the same government structures, the same way to participate that we had decades, if not hundreds of years ago.
And a few weeks ago, in one of our first episodes, we actually talked about the fact that countries, as they exist, kind of cause a lot of harm. We talked about borders, the fact that they're a novel invention that leads to discrimination, that lead to people dying when trying to cross them, and that lead to differences being highlighted instead of being brought together in order to create something beautiful together. This time, it's a bit of a different angle because we want to talk about the fact that if countries and nations as we understand them were being innovated, as some of them are, they would stand a better chance at delivering what they're supposed to be delivering, which is key services for their citizens, which is a social contract that is strong and well.
So this week we have looked at two examples that are very, very important, Estonia and Taiwan. These two countries, they are very influential on the world scene despite being relatively small countries, achieved great results by completely innovating the way governments relate to their citizens. Just to summarize, they use digital tools, they use participatory methods to ensure that citizens' voices are heard, and that everything is way more efficient, direct, and basically better functioning for everyone.
Do you want to give us the example of Estonia? In one of the chats this week, you actually mentioned how they took a big leap forward a couple of decades ago in order to directly go towards strong internet infrastructure, if I'm not mistaken.
More or less. Basically, Estonia in 1991 became an independent republic, moved away from the Soviet Republic, and obviously was lagging behind in terms of infrastructure and connectivity and so on. And Finland, a neighboring country, proposed to give for free the analog telephone network, so the old landlines, to Estonia for them to move slowly forward. And Estonia refused the help and said, no, we are not going to be behind the curve, we're going to get ahead. So they implemented the Tiger Leap, if I remember the name correctly.
I love the name.
The Tiger Leap. And basically they switched directly to mobile networks. So they were among the first countries to have cell phones, among the first countries to have internet, and already in 1997, 97% of schools in Estonia were connected to the internet.
And I checked some data. In France today, it's 96% of schools. So 20 years later, basically France is still behind Estonia in terms of connectivity.
So this is just an example of the amazing work that a country like Estonia, a small country with back then few resources, could do just with the right political visions and intention. And Taiwan is a similar example. Taiwan is way more about involving citizens in their decision-making process and stay ahead of the curve of democracy. And again, in just little more than 20 years of being a democracy, Taiwan is ranking consistently better under all democratic values compared to very long established democracies like the United Kingdom, France, the United States, and so on.
Exactly. And I think Taiwan is an amazing example for a few reasons. I think they managed, we talked about it in last week's episode that you can check out. And after the Sunflower Revolution, they actually managed to gamify consensus through participatory tools that are quite innovative. So for example, on the contentious issue of the legalization of Uber, they involved all stakeholders, they managed to map out opinions, emotions, feelings about it. And then they actually managed to push participants to make detailed statements, as detailed as possible, in order to be able to come to a consensus of most groups. And like this, they managed to legalize Uber and use this process for many, many other hot topics. So I think Estonia and Taiwan are two examples of countries that decided to actually innovate the way the country operates. I think Taiwan is extremely interesting as well because it's about involving citizens. And I think democracy as we know it, meaning you vote once every couple of years, no longer works. We see that it's basically oligarchies with politicians holding too much power a lot of the time because once they're there, it's very difficult to be removed. And we see that citizens don't have enough of a say, don't have the possibility to express their knowledge and their expertise regularly enough. There's no one better to be able to tell you their issues than citizens themselves. and to be able to tell you where the budget should be going than citizens themselves. They know the priorities more than politicians do a lot of the time. And Taiwan actually managed to innovate and bring citizens into the process.
So that's it, bottom line. So that's very important for all countries to know and for all countries to consider. There are ways to actually involve citizens in decision making. There are ways to ensure that citizens participate way more. And a country with a declining participation is a country that is dying. So our task today, our task in this episode, is actually to relay the message that if we manage to build a global country, if we manage to build a global institution that has to deal with global challenges and tackle the biggest issues of our times, there is no way we're going to be successful if people elect representatives every so on and so forth and do not manage to feel part of this incredible mission.
Exactly. And so this week we also actually looked at micronations. And in addition to Taiwan and Estonia as countries that are actually innovating, we said let's look at innovation itself when it comes to what we consider a nation or a country. We didn't yet look into decentralized nations and those type of things. This will be another episode. But we looked at those examples. You might have seen some movies about it of a couple of individuals that decide to establish a country or a nation. So micronations are basically often linked to a specific territory that tends to be quite small, and they're not recognized by the international community, and they don't have sovereignty over the territory, but they try to act as states. There's a few types of micronations. I'm simplifying it a lot. There's some that are out of protest, some out of arts, some people just want to dodge taxes and live in their little empire, as you usually have some that I call this, as they call it. There's some that are just social experiments and so on. But they actually innovate the way we see nations, right? So some people just, buy a flat and say, look, this is going to be a nation from now on. We declare independence and, we're going to guarantee all rights of citizens. And then they gather a lot of interest. For example, there's one in Australia that got 3,000 citizens signed up online out of a flat, and it had progressive liberal values. Again, most people never been to the territory of that micronation because it was a flat, but still kind of identified with it. And I wanted to mention one example that I thought was very relevant, which is one that Greenpeace Chile did. So in Chile, you have a lack of legislation when it comes to the protection of some glaciers.
Yeah.
And Greenpeace Chile said, well, this is not acceptable. There's an obligation to take care of glaciers in Chile. So until Chile actually addresses this, we will create the Glacier Nation, basically. And you had 40,000 people from across the world that signed up to become part of this Glacier Nation. You can check it out online. It wasn't about having territory, about having control of the territory. It was about saying, or at least that's how I interpret it, glaciers and nature are common good, yet one country is fucking it up. Not just one, but this country in particular is fucking it up. That's unacceptable. We declare it to be ours until they're adequately protected, and then we'll give back glaciers to Chile.
And I think they also intelligently leverage a loophole. There apparently certain glaciers were not clearly defined between the two nations they were bordering there. So they also played smart. It was not just a political statement, it was more.
Exactly, but I think this was really interesting because one of the issues I see with micronation, despite the fact that I find it very, very interesting, is the fact that again they are linked to territory, right? So it's this platform on the sea is mine, right? Why not? You build it, why not? You can see Rosa Island on Netflix or something like this. It's interesting. It's a really interesting experiment. But they're always linked to territory or to disputed territory or to sovereignty. And if you look at episode 1 of the show, we explain how countries by nature create violence, wars, and discrimination just because it's to the exclusion of others. From the moment you say this is mine, it's to the exclusion of others. Not everyone can fit on a small piece of land. So it's to the exclusion of others. I think in today's world, we need to look at countries, and it's why we mentioned as well Estonia and Taiwan, as more innovative. So not necessarily linked to a piece of land. You need to have, I think, representative offices like embassies and so on to be able to provide certain services to citizens. But it doesn't have to be linked to one particular piece of land, unlike what micronations are doing. It can be linked to humanity as a whole. We all belong to this, right? You have the European Union, not everyone is based in the same country.
Absolutely.
The United States, not everyone is based in the same states. Yet you have access to certain rights, certain services from a higher level up.
And I think it is a very important concept because some people might think that we are trying to build an institution or a country just to create another group of people that feel different than the others and try to oppose other groups. But it's not the case. I mean, our effort is an inclusive effort. We want to build something where everyone can feel part of. And a micronation or a small territory is always exclusive by principle because it's very difficult to access. And also new experiment, like I know there are digital nations that have been created, meaning groups of people on the internet that are trying to build states together, networks, states, which I find fascinating, exactly as micronations. But still with the limitation that I feel a lot of the experiments are done to represent an interest, a group, in contrast with other. So I know there is, for example, a strong school of thought about competing network states, so digital states online, where I don't know if you are very wealthy and from a certain country you will access one network instead of another one, and so on and so forth, because this network will represent your ideas, your values. So I don't know, if you are very wealthy, you might want very low taxation, and so there is a network state for that. However, that reinforces the problem we are having today. It will cause more conflicts, more social issues. It will not create that unity, the message of familiarity, of solidarity that we're trying to bring forward today, here, right now. So I agree, micronations are fascinating, but I think that what Estonia has done, for example, is way more fascinating because they managed to use the physical infrastructure of a country to extend digital citizenship to everyone, for example, across the planet. And it's also smart on their side because they get more interest and more people, but this a message of openness.
I completely agree. I think in general, it's like when one region within a country, I'm not talking about when you had historical divisions or cultural differences and so on, but for example, when Lombardia in Italy talks about becoming independent, it's always the wealthiest. And what about the most vulnerable? What happens, right? So it's always like those competing network states. It's a bit like, well, I'm here because I'm rich, so I don't want taxation.
Yeah.
And actually a lot of micronations are about this as well, right? Like no taxation, no whatever, no state intervention. Well, it's extremely privileged people that can actually afford it. And forgetting that a lot of them actually benefited from state services, from very strong social nets that were there thanks to taxation. Before, but suddenly not giving back. I think that's not the right message when we talk about a global country for us. It's about actually ensuring that we are united, that we support one another, that we redistribute resources, whether wealth, whether food-wise, whether energy-wise, and so on, across the world in an equitable manner.
Okay. So basically what we can learn from the states are, first of all, it's possible to create a nation, a country, and this is what micronations have done for many decades. And
they haven't created countries though.
They've tried, but I mean, some have been quite successful. Some have been so successful that traditional nation states had to destroy them, like Rhode Island. So clearly, there is something there. And then we also learned from more digital examples that today we have tools to reach everyone across the planet to build something together. And finally, lastly, I think we learned also from traditional states like Estonia and Taiwan that even a legacy country like them can innovate a lot and shorten the distance between institutions and citizens, which is a lesson that we need to bring with us in our attempt to build something new. And so if we bring all this together, I'm confident that this week's research showed us that basically what we're doing is possible and is not crazy.
And what we are doing is building a democratic global country. So to recap, at Atlas, our members across the world are working together to be able to democratize the world. And this matters, because this actually means that you will get more resources. For example, if we had a global democratic country where you would vote, pay taxes and so on, we might have a global universal basic income. We might be able to finally tax multinational companies like Amazon and Facebook that don't pay their share taxes, and it takes away from public services. We would be able to stop climate change, which means we wouldn't be living in the fear that our planet will be destroyed and in unhealthy environments, and much more. So for this, we are launching consultations in a couple of weeks in January across the world. So sign up. The link is in the description under. And you'll be able to partake in them to tell us how you want to be governed, at which level, what type of democracy you want. No one says we have to replicate existing ones at the global level. It can be innovated. Then we'll actually pressure the United Nations through a political campaign to make it happen. And after this, once we vetoed, probably, most likely, we'll be building these global democratic countries ourselves.
So follow us, like this video, like this page, share with people that you know, because we need people, we need a lot of humans to build what we're doing, and you could be part of it.
Have an amazing week and see you next week.